Today we'll be speaking about patent-related incentives. This presentation will be about 9 to 10 minutes long. So I am a patent practitioner, so that will be the next slide. So I'm a patent attorney, so I am a lawyer as well as an engineer and a patent agent. So I don't particularly do SR&ED or grant incentives, but because of these programs, there's a lot of synergies, and hopefully you can look into these and help your clients. So there's 5 we'll be talking about today. A lot of them are very similar and tend to overlap in what they cover, but it's more about having a good list and of resources. Some of them you can actually overlap and piggyback, sometimes even with SR&ED. %. So today we'll be speaking about the Quebec Patent Box program. Then we'll talk about EDC, CAN export, this IRAP IP assist, IPON, which is IP Ontario if you're in Ontario, and there are generally other provincial ones if you're not in Ontario, and then there's Elevate IP, which is also national. So what is IP? So generally IP does include things that are intangible, which can be patents and trademarks, and generally trade secrets or copyright. Often the copyright is software code. So these are things that you can think about, and some of the programs do cover the hard IP, which I would call patents, but as well as the software IP, which is trademark, and sort of unregistered copyright, such as your code, and any legal agreements related to these items. So briefly, I don't know how many of you are Quebec practitioners, but it's maybe something worth looking at. There is the Quebec IDCI patent box incentives. So generally, it's a deduction for the commercialization of innovations in Quebec. It's released March 2020, and you get some advantages for the taxation year after December 31st, 2020. And you're now get an effective tax rate of 2% on the parts of the research that were done that are attributable to taxable income to that particular version of IP. So your client created some IP, and you created some income, whether it's a licensing or some revenue on sale of your software or your SaaS product, and the effective tax rate provincially is only 2%, which is pretty decent. So qualified corporation, it means you need to be established in Quebec, carried on as a business in Quebec, from which it derives the income. What is a qualified IP asset? It just means some sort of intangible property that's either invention protected by a patent, certificate of supplemental protection, which is for pharmaceuticals, plant variety protected by plant breeders' rights. That one's rare, but has sort of made a bit of a resurgence due to the cannabis market, but still fairly rare. Or software protected by copyright, which is probably the most common for you. And in addition, it must have been as a result of some sort of R&D carried out in Quebec, in whole or in the part, and the part, of course, is the prorated or the nexus part, which we will speak about. Okay, so, and generally you need to have some sort of establishment in Quebec, some sort of IP. That R&D was performed in Quebec that resulted in that IP, and and you can claim the SR&ED in Quebec, which is now required. Okay, so there's a 3-part test for this. You have the qualified profits from a qualified IP asset of the corporation, and then you got your profits, which is attributable to that IP asset. Not only you have the IP connection, you need the Quebec connection, which is the kind of Quebec nexus ratio, which is the relative amount of R&D carried out in Quebec by that corporation. And you have the tax benefit, which you mentioned, which is only 2% of the income derived from that IP, and all that pro rata for parts 1 and 2. Okay, so number 1, you look at your profit related to the asset, the approximation of value. Number 2, your Quebec nexus. And number 3, your 2%, as opposed to the general corporate tax rate of 11.5%. So not bad. Okay, so there was a bit of clarification on the definition of qualified IP asset, which is generally, you want to look at the OEDCA definitions, and it must result from R&D activities in Quebec, and the activities must contribute significantly to the creation. Again, that sort of connection with the IP. Okay, so the criteria must be able to demonstrate to the Minister of Revenue the link between these R&D activities and the IP asset. That's your record keeping. You might already be doing it for SR&ED anyway, and that allocation as well. So an engineer might work half-time in Quebec and half-time in projects outside of Quebec, so you need the record keeping ahead of time to justify your R&D activities. You must have active participation in the creation, so it can't be passive or just purchasing licenses and things like that. And in terms of timing, that is corporation tax year that begins after December 31st, 2020. So you can't recover for profits before that time. So this is a summary. And, we already spoke about these items, but generally you'll need new documentation or good records that would justify why your income qualifies for the patent box. Okay, for the nexus ratio, you have to show a direct link between the income receiving the benefits and the R&D expenditures contributing to that income. However, as a traditional measure, the OECD standards also allow for the use of a nexus ratio, again, based on a moving average of R&D expenditures. In this regard, work is underway to establish the rules that will allow the nexus ratio to be directly linked to a qualified IP asset. And these the new requirements will apply in respect to December 31st, 2023. Okay, so this is just a summary of the nexus ratio. And there will be some, the newer rules that we just spoke about will be implemented in 2024 and beyond. So there's some implications on getting the appropriate evaluators of the IP. Okay, number 2, so most of the grants are similar, yet different. So I'll run through them, and you'll have to just look at them individually in terms of requirements. But generally, we have something called CanExport. So it's by the EDC, Export Development Canada, which means that it's for markets that you're exporting. So most of these funds don't cover Canadian IP, but they will cover things like US IP and outside of North America, but they don't want you to pay for Canadian patents or Canadian trademarks. They've broken it up into SMEs and then more innovation. So innovation is generally pre-revenue or about to commercialize, and SMEs do have revenue. So the first one for SMEs, it's not just IP. So just if your clients are doing things like traveling, going to trade shows, any sort of marketing for export purposes, a lot of those things are covered. Market research, of course, IP, certification, local legal advice, or in her case, foreign legal advice, and digital marketing, which is SEO, ads, all those things are covered, which is fairly generous. There are certain requirements, like you can't already be in that market, so it's really for new exports if you're looking to do. And export does cover exporting of technology and not just exporting of products, which is why this is generous. Program tends to run out of money fairly quickly. I believe year end is March 31st, so about April 1st, it's a good idea to start requesting the funding. So things like social media is covered. So you want to do ads in the US, for example, online marketplaces such as Amazon and Alibaba, and the search engines such as Google search optimization or Google Ads themselves. So you have to be for profit, you have to be incorporated, you have to have a CRA business number. I don't believe you need to be Canadian controlled, less than 500 employees, but you need $100,000 revenues. So that's pretty much the threshold for this one, which some of these startups may not qualify for. So it's really 100K for this program. And this one's 50% coverage, 50% copay, and in-kind contributions do not count. Okay, so the other one called innovation is for pre-revenue companies. I don't want to go through all of them, but basically IP is covered, as well as, again, export activities for innovative companies that may be pre-revenue. So again, same thing, but you have to have a prototype and to intend to commercially launch within 5 years. You don't need revenue. I mean, 5 years is a long time. Everyone intends to launch in 5 years. So that's sort of a given. You can submit 100K and you copay 25%. Government pays 75%. Again, not bad. Things you don't cover are activities within Canada, patent filings, trademark filings, filing a PCT in Canada, legal fees. For legal fees for Canada, but you can do legal fees for a US IP strategy or a worldwide IP strategy outside of Canada, things like that. Okay, that was CanExport, which is Export Development Canada. Next one is the federal government, IRAP, which is by NRC or Industry Canada. The point is, it's all federal. It's IP Assist. Again, they cover a lot. The financial support is up to 50K. Generally, it's 75% covered, but there are some programs where you can get $25,000 covered, and the fee's only $500. So that one's pretty good. But generally, let's just say, for your intents and purposes, up to 50K, and then you need to go through the particular application process. So again, you can do IP strategy, searches, some evaluation of your commercial contracts, things like that, but they really don't like actual patent drafting and filing covered under this particular program, but there may be other programs that you can do. So this is more of a strategy assessment, searching for opportunities, searching for risks, things like that. Okay, next is provincial, which is IPON. This is for Ontario, but there are other provinces may have their own. So it's similarly for IP. IPON, I believe, has up to 100K in funding with a copay element, which is approximately 10 to 30%. Okay, so there's various programs. You can receive up to $35,000, so then future funding calls up to $100,000, as we mentioned. But this one does cover patent filings, writing a provisional patent application, trademark filing costs. Could be within Canada and can be with outside of Canada. This is, of course, available only to Ontario companies. Again, I'm not really sure about the foreign ownership if it has to be Canadian owned, but at the very minimum, it needs to be located in Ontario. Okay, last one, Elevate IP, also federal. A very good program as from Industry Canada, and within that, they have engaged various incubators to execute their program. The one in Ontario, Manitoba, it's Saskatchewan, is Communitech, which is Waterloo. But if you need Montreal, it's Maine. East Coast is Springboard. West Coast is New Ventures, and Alberta is the ones indicated there. Innovate Calgary is the main one. So my firm is sort of entrenched within all of these in case you want to look at them. So that's the list. This is more of a list rather than the map. If you're more of a list visual person. Okay. So 3 programs up to 100K. First one, if you don't have any IP education, they'll give that to you, or they'll engage someone like me to give you the one-on-one IP education, or they'll do workshops. Level 2 is you can do strategy up to $25,000. If it's the one in Communitech, you don't have to copay for that one. If it's one of the other provinces, you do need a copay element. And level 3 is generally up to $100,000 minus whatever you got in level 2. This one does have a copay, and this is more about execution, which is the patent and trademark costs. But again, very generous programs. So take advantage of it, especially if you are doing SR&ED and seeing innovation from your clients. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Earl. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much. I found that very useful, interesting information. It's a nice switch because a lot of those costs are related to a lot of the companies we deal with, and therefore it's quite useful for us to be able to provide some other additional information.
Here's my calendar and my LinkedIn. Sorry, if people want to jot that down. Yep. Sorry.
Leave that up there while I finish this off. Be my guest. Just someone was asking about the government assistance issue, and that is just the federal fall economic update. And that's a result of the Tax Court of Canada decision, which was affirmed by the Federal Court of Appeal that the full principal amount of a concessional loan, which is an interest-free loan or loan with low market interest rates, basically a non-commercial loan, received from a public authority was government assistance for income tax purposes. So the economic statement proposes to amend the Income Tax Act to provide that bona fide concessional loans from public authorities with reasonable repayment terms will generally not be considered government assistance. It's going to be effective November 21st, 23. So again, very new, very current information for people. So again, if people have any suggestions or anything else for next year's or future ones, David and I would be very happy to hear any feedback on this one or suggestions for the future ones. I would like to thank everyone for attending, and especially to David and his team for doing all the hard work and putting this together. David, anything further?
No, I think that sums it up. I hope everyone has a great weekend. And yeah, all the way through the year, if you have any input or feedback, please send it to any one of us, and we'll try to integrate it into next year's session. Thanks again, Earl. Ben.
Thanks everybody
Justin,
for attending.
Elizabeth.